In this video, we're going to talk about the basics of a digital workflow. So a workflow are the steps that you take when working. A digital photography workflow can be broken down into the following steps. Number one is planning for your photo shoot. This can be as simple as deciding to take a walk and bring your camera, or as complicated as planning out a photo shoot weeks and months ahead of time. Just going out and doing a photo walk, as some people call it, can be really great, especially if you're between jobs or clients, to keep your creativity flowing. But the more professional you get in the photography world, the more you're probably going to be planning out your photo shoot. For instance, I remember when Annie Leibovitz talked about photographing the Queen of England. She planned for a couple of months and had, I think it was something like 11 different assistants helping her out. And they're planning the location within the location, which for that it was inside of Buckingham Palace, what exact room, what the lighting was going to be, what the composition of the photo was going to be, so that once the Queen got there, they were ready to go, and I believe they only had 30 minutes to complete the entire photo shoot. Another example is, I remember watching a video about the photographer Platon, who photographed President Obama when he was in office. And with that, he only had 5 minutes for his photo shoot. So he did have to plan a lot more than usual for what he usually does. Okay, the next step is capturing the image. And this is where making those considerations for aperture, shutter speed, ISO, composition, and its final use become really important. If you remember from the previous weeks, we talked a bit about aperture and how that changes your depth of field, and shutter speed, which shows movement by either having a long shutter speed and showing it, or having a fast shutter speed and freezing the movement. And ISO is that extra setting that kind of makes up for whether you have enough light coming in for a good exposure. Composition could be huge also. And the final use can be really important. I know we've talked about how raw files are ideal for editing, but sometimes if you're doing certain shoots, it's not as important. For example, if you know that you're shooting an event where the final photos are only going to be put up online and they're never going to be blown up big or used for printing, then maybe shooting in JPEG is actually the better option, especially if you're under a tight deadline. Alright, so your next step is download the image to your computer. And this is going to be different depending on your image capture device. If you're shooting on a phone or tablet, maybe that's airdropping or actually hooking up through a wire. If you're using a DSLR or mirrorless camera, that's taking out the SD card and inserting it in. Whatever it is, you do need to download the image to your computer. Next is making a backup of your image, and this is super important. You never know when a file or device will become corrupted. In fact, you could just basically count on eventually something is going to fail, whether it's your computer hard drive that you're saving your photos on or your external hard drive. Something's going to fail. So for me personally, I have 2 external hard drives that I save everything to. One of them just has my photos, and then I have a backup of that photo folder on another hard drive, a larger one, that has all of my digital files, whether they're photos or not. So this can be really important. I have a friend who, this was years ago now, but she had all of her photos saved to the hard drive of her laptop, and that hard drive failed, and she was not able to recover anything on there. All of the photos of her son up until the age of 4 was on that hard drive, and she lost them all. So that's really heartbreaking. So always make a backup. Okay, so next is going to be edit your image using apps or software such as Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop, which is exactly why you're taking this class now. Next is save your working file. So for example, when we're working in Photoshop files are called PSDs. PSDs will keep all of the work and the layers that you create in Photoshop. We haven't covered layers yet, but we will in the next couple of weeks. And so you can go back and tweak and make edits if necessary. When you get to having this workflow, it's really important to start naming your files more specifically, especially I didn't mention it before, but when you download the image to your file, your image to your computer, naming something besides DSCN underscore 1943 or whatever will become important, because it becomes a lot harder to find specific images, especially if you're looking for photos from 10 years ago or something. And if you're using the same camera, eventually those numbers will start to recycle again. So I've had clients where this has happened to them, and they go to search for a specific image and 4 different versions are showing up because they never renamed anything. So naming your original files is important. Saving your working files is important. I usually like to rename my working file with my last name, my project name, and working. So let's say it's a wedding shoot. I would put Redondo underscore the Gonzalez wedding underscore working. So I know that that is my file that has all of the different layers and such that I've done. All right, so next we have save your file in a format needed for your project. So for example, if, and this becomes especially important when you get into, let's say, marketing or social media marketing or management, which I've done before, where you have to have different size files for different areas. So let's say I was making, we're having an event and I'm making like an online flyer for our event. I would have different names, like one for the website, one that would say Facebook at the end, Twitter header, Instagram, so I know which one I'm posting where. And if you're sending it out to other people for them to use, then it's easy for them to tell what they're using it for too. Okay, and last but not least, delivering of the final files. So this could be delivering files to a client, saving a print file to upload to have printed at a print lab, make your own prints, posting to social media and or your website. So yeah, that's usually the final step. Get it uploaded and share it with the world. I know this kind of seems a little bit overwhelming at first, but the sooner you start getting yourself into this habit of following some kind of version of these steps, the easier it will be to keep your files nice and organized for future use. So I hope this helps with your workflow. If you have questions, always feel free to email me.